The ruins of the crashed transport groaned beneath the pressure of twisted alloy and scorched plating as Kale Riven pulled himself deeper into the carcass of the wreck. Around him, the dense canopy of Virelian 9 smothered the light into a sickly green haze. Smoke clung to the air like a shroud, stinging his eyes and throat. The sharp scent of burning fuel seeped into his senses, but he pushed on. The pulse on his scanner was steady, faint, but unmistakable. Something or someone had survived this descent into chaos. Beyond a bulkhead, warped like melted bone, a groan emerged, weak and trembling. He followed it, crawling through crumpled corridors that once formed a diplomatic cruiser. Inside, alien vines had already begun reclaiming the metal. Amid tangled debris, a streak of deep purple cut through the grime. It was hair impossibly smooth and untouched by flame. Beneath it lay a figure, a woman or something close. Her skin shimmered like wet jade, casting back glints of shifting color. Black horns curled from her temples in smooth arcs, elegant even in ruin. Her robes, or what remained of them, clung in ragged strips. Despite the alien features, the outline of her body was unmistakably humanoid. Something inside Kale, something old human and impossible to explain, tightened in his chest. He moved fast, clearing the debris. Her breathing was shallow, her forehead split by a wound leaking iridescent green blood. One leg was trapped under a spar of carbon steel. He strained against it until it gave way with a final metallic shriek, freeing her. She was surprisingly light in his arms, delicate, but not fragile. A faint heat pulsed from her skin, and she reeked not of death, but of life, held just barely intact. Outside, he set her down beneath the arching roots of a massive tree, its trunk hollowed and gnarled like ancient bone. His fingers moved with practiced efficiency, tearing a strip from his sleeve to clean the wound above her eye. The green blood shimmered under sunlight as he dabbed at it, taking care not to press too hard against the strange ridged skin. His eyes flicked over her robes. What remained of diplomatic insignia were scorched, but recognizable. Velcar design, unmistakable. He recognized the type, a political envoy. Disgraced, most likely, given her isolation and lack of escort. Something had gone wrong. His mind cycled through possibilities: defection, betrayal, internal purge. None of it mattered in that moment. She was alive. That was all that counted. He scanned the perimeter. The jungle pressed close as if hungry for new prey. Virelian 9 was no place for fragile cargo. The crash had torn a gouge through the canopy, and now the predators would come. Already distant howls cut through the humidity, long low and layered with intelligence. Not scavengers. Trackers. She stirred against the tree, her breathing sharpening. Her yellow eyes opened once more, flickering with something unreadable: confusion, then disdain, then perhaps disbelief. But she did not resist when he helped her to her feet. She leaned on him briefly, more from pride than need it seemed, and then pushed forward on her own legs, wobbling but upright. Her movements were too precise to be feral. She had training, the kind that came with status and purpose. More howls closer now. The sound shifted in pitch, layered and coordinated. Not one beast, a pack. The Xerian hunters of Viralia hunted by scent and vibration, favoring crash sites. Their teeth could cut through armor. Their speed rivaled skimmers. He guided her away from the wreck, deeper into the green web of vines and spiked flora. She followed, silent but alert. The terrain grew denser. Every movement through the foliage cracked twigs and sent shivers into the air. Predators would hear. Predators would follow. Sweat poured down Kale's back as he slashed aside low-hanging vines. The air grew heavier, soaked with decay and pulsing life. Behind them, the rhythmic crashing of underbrush signaled pursuit. Her breath came faster, and though she tried to conceal it, her pace flagged. He slowed to match. Adrenaline surged, but he remained calm. Years of survival training took over. Broken branches, disturbed moss, fractured roots, all clues in the jungle's language. There was a stream ahead. If they could reach it, the current might erase their trail. But the stalker emerged before the water. It came from the left, massive mottled, and near silent. Camouflaged against the trees, its skin absorbed the jungle's colors, turning it into living shadow. Its head was squat jaw, layered with vibro teeth. It prowled forward, body rippling with silent rage. Kale made the decision in a blink. He scanned the terrain vines above a downed trunk nearby the angle of descent on the far bank. He whispered the plan into his mind, then moved. A sudden charge, a blur of motion. He drew his blade and slashed at its forward leg just enough to make it stumble. It reared back, jaws open. Kale was already leaping hands, catching a hanging vine body arcing up and away. Behind him, the beast snapped at empty air, its roar shaking nearby trees. From his perch, he glimpsed the woman, Leora Valen, if he remembered the Velkar naming structure, staring at him from behind the fallen log. Her eyes, even from that distance, flickered with something more than shock. Respect, fascination. The stalker rammed the tree. Kale dropped, landing hard in the dirt as claws carved furrows where he'd been. He rolled, caught Leora's arm, and together they crashed through the jungle. The sound of water surged. They broke from the trees into a clearing sliced by a crystalline stream. Without hesitation, Kale plunged in, dragging her behind him. The current hit like ice, cutting through sweat and fear. She stumbled, nearly swept away. He caught her again, arm tightening around her waist, anchoring them both. She pressed against him, unsteady but not resisting. Her breath was ragged, her heartbeat racing through her thin skin. The stream masked their scent, and the stalkers hesitated at the edge, pacing, sniffing but unwilling to enter. For a moment, the world shrank to a single point. Two figures in alien water surrounded by a jungle of death clinging to each other. Her body rested against his, not from necessity now, but from something wordless. Her pulse slowed, her eyes met his. The silence between them vibrated with something that had no name. He held her and did not let go. The jungle gave no reprieve. Even after the stalkers retreated, the trees leaned in like sentinels, watching their every step. Steam clung to the undergrowth, rising from sun-warmed leaves in lazy spirals. Kale Riven led the way upriver, following instinct and memory rather than maps. Virelia 9 was a fractured planet, its surface a tangled patchwork of valleys, canyons, and predator havens. But he had learned long ago to trust the flow of water. Water led to safety. Water led to shelter. Leora Valen stayed close behind, limping slightly, her balance still uncertain but her pride unbending. She had stopped leaning on him after the first dozen steps, even as her body betrayed its exhaustion. Her horns moved subtly, with her breath twitching at distant bird cries or the ripple of unseen movement through brush. Even injured, she radiated control, perhaps a residue of her diplomatic training, or perhaps something more innate. Kyle noticed the way her gaze moved, not just scanning for threats, but analyzing, cataloging, judging. Her eyes lingered on the way he moved the tools he carried, the way he checked behind every tree before advancing. He felt her watching him, not with suspicion, but with curiosity sharpened by necessity. As the sun bled down through the canopy, they found temporary shelter in a hollowed tree, vast and ancient. The interior smelled of rot and moss, but it was dry and hidden. Kale checked the perimeter and began assembling a makeshift barrier from vines and branches. Leora knelt nearby, gathering dried leaves and fibrous bark for bedding. The silence between them was heavy with unspoken thoughts. No orders, no commands, only tasks shared without discussion. Time passed slowly. Hunger crept in. Kale produced a ration bar from his pack, broke it in half, and placed a piece beside her without comment. She took it with a nod, biting with hesitation, then with growing hunger. She chewed in silence, and when her eyes met his, they no longer held the same guarded tension. Night fell with sudden violence. The jungle transformed under darkness. Creatures unseen by day now screamed and whispered from every direction. Glowing fungi lit small patches of forest floor in blue-green luminescence. Kale adjusted the emergency beacon's frequency, trying to cut through atmospheric interference. The pulse was steady but faint. If rescue was coming, it would be slow. Leora sat with her back against the wall of the tree, her knees drawn up, her robes still wet and clinging. Kale watched her, cataloging the ridges of her horns, the slight tremble in her fingers, the way her eyes remained fixed on the flickering beacon light, like it held more than just a promise, it held judgment. She had not spoken of her exile, but he could feel the weight of it pressing down on her. Not just the loss of title, but the loss of purpose. She was a creature forged for order, now plunged into chaos. And yet, she had survived. Not just the crash, but the betrayal that preceded it. He did not speak. Instead, he passed her a cloth and gestured to her forehead. She accepted it without protest, dabbing gently at the dried green blood still crusted at her temple. Her motions were precise, almost ceremonial. When she was done, she folded the cloth and placed it beside her like a relic. Eventually, she lay down beside the wall of the tree, her head resting on moss, her limbs curled with exhaustion. Kael did not sleep. He watched the jungle through narrow slits in the vine wall, ears tuned for movement. Occasionally, he glanced back at her. Once in a moment of stillness, she shifted in her sleep and reached out unconsciously, her hand brushing the space where he sat. He did not move. He let it rest there, light tentative, until she stirred and pulled it back. By dawn, mist covered the forest like a veil. Kael scouted ahead, leaving her in the shelter. He moved silently through the trees, listening for water, for the buzz of stalkers, for the unnatural hum of power systems. When he returned, she was awake and waiting. She had reinforced the vine wall in his absence, using the same weaving pattern he had begun the night before. Their path took them higher into a ridge where the jungle thinned into knotted roots and stone outcroppings. Here the air was clearer but colder. Kael noticed the way she wrapped her arms around herself. Despite the proud bearing, her body reacted like any other under alien gravity and damp exposure. He removed his outer jacket and draped it over her shoulders. She did not thank him, but she also did not resist. The garment dwarfed her frame, its sleeves hanging long past her elbows. She walked beside him in silence, clutching it closed at her throat. They climbed together, hand over root, sliding over damp stone and dodging carnivorous vines that snapped at movement. Once she slipped. Kael caught her waist, steadying her before she fell. Her breath hitched. Their eyes met. She nodded once and moved on. Midway through the climb, Kael's scanner detected a faint energy spike, ancient tech buried beneath layers of overgrowth and stone. They found it wedged between two stone columns, an alien structure collapsed and inert, pulsing faintly beneath a web of root systems. Berelia 9 had once belonged to an advanced civilization long vanished. Their remnants dotted the planet ruins, laced with residual energy artifacts, half buried and humming with dormant potential. Inside the broken archway, Kael discovered what looked like a containment chamber, its biolock still active. Leora examined the symbols etched into the base and traced them with her fingertips. Her face shifted recognition, not of the words but of the pattern. Velkar roots, perhaps. A shared linguistic ancestor. Her skin shimmered subtly as her hand moved across the surface. The chamber pulsed in response. Something inside came to life, soft blue light spreading across the wall in geometric patterns. Heat rose from the floor. The air thickened with static. Kael stepped back, watching as the chamber unfurled like a flower. Within two alcoves emerged mirrored spaces shaped for bipedal bodies. Symbols lit up between them, not instructions, but a ritual. She turned toward him with calm certainty. No words were needed. He stepped into one alcove. She stepped into the other. The chamber closed. Energy surged. Lights bled from floor to ceiling. Biological filaments extended from the walls, wrapping around their forms, brushing skin, reading genomes, mapping neural frequencies. The warmth intensified. Kael felt pressure behind his eyes, a pull across his chest, the sensation of falling into something both external and intimate. The bond began. The chamber sealed around them with a soundless finality, isolating Kael Riven and Leora Valen from the chaos of the jungle beyond. Inside, time felt suspended, the air thick with scentless vapor and flickering light. The biopod system awakened fully now, its ancient technology responding not to command, but to proximity. Every surface shimmered with intelligence, an alien architecture designed not to heal one, but to join two. Kael stood still as the threads of living circuitry crept along his arms and spine, reading him cell by cell. They moved without friction, without pain, wrapping him in soft warmth that vibrated with a low subconscious frequency, like the hum of a mother's heartbeat, remembered from the womb. Across from him, Leora floated slightly above her alcove floor, her body surrounded by the same web of organic light, her jade skin pulsing with strands of iridescent green and gold. Her eyes were closed, but her face held no tension. Somewhere deep in the mechanisms of the pod, a decision was made. The system recognized them as compatible. Tendrils of bioluminescent matter bridged the gap between their chambers, touching air, then light, then flesh. Neural patterns synchronized, respiratory rhythms aligned. His heartbeat stuttered once, then steadied to match hers. A second pulse, not his own, echoed beneath his ribs. Emotion bled through the field, a sharp spike of confusion, followed by a hesitant curiosity. then a deeper, more vulnerable sensation, longing laced with shame. It wasn't his, it was hers. Images flickered behind his closed eyes. A grand chamber with stained glass ceilings, diplomats with faces like masks, a younger Liora standing proud and hopeful before an unyielding council. Words cut her down. Accusations burned into memory. She was cast out not for weakness, but for daring to believe in unity. Her disgrace had been engineered, and the betrayal came from those closest to her. He felt it as she had felt it, each slight, each lie, each collapse of trust. But the feed wasn't one way. His own memories surged back through the link. Cold metal floors, a dead comms team, orders that left civilians behind, a war-torn outpost, and the choice to disobey for the sake of a child. The feeling of exile among his own kind, the quiet resentment of surviving when better men hadn't. They saw each other now fully, stripped of deception, made equal in loss. The chamber responded with approval. A pulse of energy burst outward, not harsh but warm, like a fever breaking. Their bodies flinched together, and a third presence emerged. Not a consciousness, but a resonance. A third rhythm, humming low and faint just beneath thought. A bridge. The filaments dissolved, the chambers retracted. Kale stumbled forward. Liora caught herself against the edge of the pod frame, their eyes locked. Neither spoke. There was no need. The bond hummed beneath their skin like a second heartbeat. She reached out first, her hand resting flat against his chest, not testing, not questioning, but affirming. Outside, the jungle called. They left the ruins at dusk, moving as a single unit now. Where Kyle scanned for threats, Liora listened for patterns. Where she hesitated at unfamiliar terrain, his hand was already steadying her. Their motions adjusted to each other instinctively, even subconsciously. There was no spoken coordination. The mind link persisted in a subtle hum, flashes of insight, emotion direction shared in pulses. When the predators returned, they didn't flee. A pack of Xerian stalkers emerged from the underbrush, drawn by the residual energy of the pod. Liora's hand went to Kale's arm before the creatures even stepped into the clearing. She sensed them. Not their scent or sound, but their intention. He felt the warning through her before he even heard the growls. They didn't need a plan. Kale moved left, drawing his sidearm in a fluid arc. Liora moved right, dipping behind low foliage. Her hand brushed a dormant vine beast pod and activated its tendrils, twisting the undergrowth into a snare. One stalker leapt its claws, reaching for Kale's throat, but he was already gone, sidestepping with grace borrowed from her own reflexes. He dropped to a knee and fired the bolt, slicing the creature mid-lunge. Another howled from behind, charging Liora, but she turned before it struck, palm extended. Her skin shimmered and the alien flora reacted, binding the beast in writhing coils. They fought not as allies, but as extensions of one another. His vision adjusted to the wavelengths she favored. Her balance corrected with instincts borrowed from his muscle memory. A third stalker dove from the trees. Kale turned without looking, already knowing Liora would cover him. She did. A blast of sound tuned to disrupt the creature's inner ear pulsed from her wrist device. It fell from the branches like stone. When the last one fled, Kyle stood breathing hard, blood on his arm, a shallow cut along his collarbone. Liora approached without hesitation. Her fingers pressed to the wound, not just to check it, but to understand it. Her skin warmed, her irises shifting to a deeper gold. She pressed her palm against the blood. Bioluminescent tracings lit her arm. The skin closed beneath her touch. Later by the stream again, they rested. Their bodies no longer trembled from adrenaline. Instead, a slower tremor passed between them, a ripple of presence. She sat beside him, knees drawn up, the light of the moons casting silver across her shoulders. He felt her thoughts as faint echoes. No words, only feelings. Regret, relief, curiosity. A weight slowly lifting. Kale reached for her hand. She didn't pull away. Their fingers entwined, not with ceremony, not with seduction, but with a quiet inevitability. The bond had not asked permission. It had grown between blood and breath. Now it hummed in their skin, unshakable. And somewhere beneath the surface of the stream, the last of the pod's signals dispersed into the water, broadcasting far beyond the jungle. Not just a flare for rescue, but a new signal altogether. One crafted by two minds made one. The jungle no longer felt like a maze. The rhythm of movement had changed. Kael Riven and Leora Valen moved with unified precision, a pattern invisible to the eye but woven deeply into their bodies. They no longer paused to plan. There was no need. Each twist of path, each motion through the ferns unfolded with a shared purpose that flowed like breath through their limbs. Predators remained, but their approach brought less urgency. Danger once paralyzing had become mechanical. Kael's perception expanded with her awareness of sound, heat, and neural tension in nearby creatures. Leora's instincts sharpened with his battlefield reflexes and trajectory mapping. The bond was not constant chatter. It was a quiet undercurrent, a murmur of alertness and decision. Their weapons became extensions of the other. Kael's sidearm responded faster when her senses flared. Leora's tech interfaces synced without delay when Kael activated his scanner. When he lifted his plasma rifle and aimed without sight, her mind aligned the reticle. She could feel the angle before the shot left the barrel. The creature it struck had no chance to scream. More assassins came. This time, they wore cloaks of reactive camouflage, black mesh, flickering with the light of the jungle faces hidden behind mirrored visors. They moved with surgical intent, no wasted gestures, no warning sounds. Kael spotted the shimmer first. Leora sensed the shift in oxygen density. Neither spoke. Both dropped simultaneously into brush cover. The first enemy moved past them unaware. Kael circled silent as a shadow while Leora calculated angles in real time. The second assassin turned too late. A blade appeared in Kael's hand, moving as if guided by muscle memory, not entirely his own. It found the gap in armor at the base of the neck. A pulse of neural energy snapped down the target's spine before he hit the dirt. Leora caught the third. She used no weapon. Just a pulse of light coded through her hand. The implant in the attacker's skull responded with a hiss of betrayal, collapsing the nervous system. He crumpled without a sound. The final one tried to flee, only to find Kael already waiting with his blade reversed. The jungle claimed them, and silence returned. They didn't linger. They didn't question why assassins were already searching this deep. There would be more. And whoever had sent them knew something. Perhaps about the bond. Perhaps about the beacon. Kael led her into a valley where mist clung low to the earth and the sky arched wide. The canopy thinned, revealing an open gorge where the stream fell into a subterranean river. The cliff's edge was slick, treacherous. Below, the water roared. Leora paused beside him, sensing his calculations. The descent was suicidal, but they both understood what it meant: escape, or pursuit with a longer delay. The leap required no confirmation. Kael grabbed her waist. Her hands found his shoulders. Together they dove. Air split around them as gravity pulled them downward. The wind howled in their ears, and for a heartbeat the world narrowed to skin and silence and the rush of nothing. Then impact. The plunge into water was violent. Cold surrounded them, pressing into their chests, dragging them down. Kael shielded her body with his own, his back striking rock. A bruise bloomed along his ribs. Bubbles streamed from his mouth and darkness threatened the edges of vision. He swam. One arm pulled through the current, the other held her tightly. Her body was limp, but her pulse, he could feel it, was steady. The bond glowed in the back of his mind like a beacon of its own. He kicked toward the light chest, burning legs heavy. They broke the surface beneath an overhang of hanging moss. The roar of the waterfall was muted here. He dragged her onto a muddy bank, collapsing beside her. She coughed, sputtered, then rolled over and retched up water. Only when she sat up, breathing ragged but alive, did he allow himself to close his eyes for a moment. She leaned against him, her skin warm again, the glow returning to her veins in slow pulses. The chamber had changed them. It had done more than heal. It had rewritten responses, restructured instincts, fused biology with intention. The bond was no longer just shared awareness. It was integrated will. The place they'd landed in was hidden, protected by vines, water, and geography. For now, they were safe. But the pulse on Kael's beacon was no longer just a cry for help. It had evolved, its frequency broadened. Data flowed through it, complex, layered, coded, not just in Terran protocols, but in Velkar ones as well. Unknowingly, they had sent a message. Somewhere far above the canopy, orbital eyes would register it. Not far from their cove, they found an ancient defense node, another relic left by the planet's vanished civilization. Kael activated it with a low burst of energy. Leora decoded the interface. The platform unfolded with mechanical grace, revealing an inert turret cluster and a collapsed drone nest. Kale salvaged what he could: a single-powered rifle, a proximity mine, a small floating drone no larger than his palm. Liora reconfigured it to track thermal profiles and reroute them a ghost generator designed for misdirection. Together they prepared. They spoke no strategy. They shared no battle plan. Their movements choreographed themselves. A snare here, a firing arc there, a fallback path beneath the root curtain. Every placement made sense, as if both had already lived the fight. When the second wave came, it was not beasts, but soldiers better equipped, tactically efficient, and under unified command. Kael recognized the insignia on their exo armor. Not local, not jungle troops. These were dispatched for retrieval or execution. Liora knew the leader. Through the bond, Kael felt the recognition hit her like a blow, an enforcer once assigned to her diplomatic corps, now reassigned as her executioner. They fought not with desperation, but precision. Kael lured them into the kill zone. Liora triggered misdirection protocols. The ghost drone projected movement deeper into the trees, drawing fire. The first unit walked into the proximity trap, and flame consumed their cover. Kael struck from behind, then vanished again into the mist. Liora moved with eerie grace. Her robes shredded her skin, marked with dirt and blood, but her mind, sharp, clear, absolute. She turned the defense platform's core into a thermal pulse grenade. When the elite charged her flank, they never reached her. The blast erased their formation in a white-hot plume of radiant fire. The final survivor fled. Kael let him run. Let him report. The message needed to spread. Back in the cove, Liora sat beside the beacon, her fingers adjusting the waveform. The transmission had grown more complex, layered in Velkar and Orion frequencies, encrypted in a way that only high-level command would recognize. Kael stood beside her, blood drying on his neck ribs, bruised but unbroken. Their bond thrummed with shared victory, shared exhaustion, and something heavier. The world had taken notice. But now the world would have to decide what to do with a human, and a Velkar bonded by chance, surviving by trust, and fighting with a precision no one had seen before. The sky tore open at dawn. 3 ships descended through the mist, their engines roaring as they carved through the canopy. Thruster wash flattened trees, scattering debris and ash across the basin. From their hidden perch above the cove, Kael Riven and Liora Valen watched with matching stillness. The silhouettes of the vessels were unmistakable, Orion-packed, military-grade, angular, and dark, bristling with plasma ports. Not rescue ships, not scouts, warbirds. Kael felt the weight of recognition tighten in his chest. One of the hull markings bore the signature design of Captain Dax Relin, a friend once, though loyalty in the Orion Pact often bent under orders. Liora stood beside him, posture straight, breath measured, her skin dimmed to a darker green as if absorbing light into tension. She had seen such ships before, but never from the perspective of prey. Below, the lead ship touched down. The hatch hissed. Dax emerged in full combat gear, flanked by 2 Orion Marines. His gaze swept the clearing with the wariness of a man who'd seen too many traps. Kael moved to the edge of the rise, body tensed, not for assault, but for confrontation. They didn't approach. Instead, another ship released its cargo. From the second vessel descended a figure that made the air colder. Towering broad, armored in ceremonial plating of council blue and obsidian. The being that stepped into the clearing radiated command. The glint of neural implants along his skull betrayed his identity before he spoke. Vex Talamar, Galactic Council Enforcer, Arbiter of Punishment, Executor of Interstellar Law. Kael felt Liora's hand tense on the rifle stock. Through the bond, he felt her certainty. Not fear, not confusion, but inevitability. She had expected this. Perhaps not now, not here, but eventually. The council always finished what it started. Vex raised his arm, activating a command beacon. From the tree line stepped another figure, smaller, sharper, quieter. Drav Saron. Kael recognized the stance, the predatory way he walked, the gleam of metal along his jawline. Saron was not a soldier. He was an assassin, an old-world blade among new-world guns. He had once served the same diplomatic complex that cast Liora out. Now he returned as its knife. Below, Dax raised a hand, half warning, half protest, but was ignored. Kael moved first. He emerged from the brush, unarmed but not empty-handed. His presence turned heads. Every soldier reacted. Guns lifted, targets locked. but he kept walking step by step until he stood between Leora and the gathering storm. Sauron's hand hovered near his weapon. Vex simply watched. From behind, Leora stepped into view. The bond made her movements natural. No hesitation, no calculation. She stood beside Kael's shoulders, square eyes forward. Together they formed a silhouette that was neither ambassadorial nor militaristic. It was symbolic, unmistakably so. From above, more drones descended, eyes of the galaxy witnessing. Vex broke the silence by issuing formal notice of arrest. Leora didn't answer. Kael didn't step aside. The moment crystallized into a perfect fracture authority against defiance law, against evolution, the past against what might come next. Somewhere inside Kael's chest, something ancient stirred, not rage, but resolution. Through the bond, Leora felt it too. The jungle, the crash, the bond, they had all led to this. Dax stepped forward, weapon still holstered, trying to de-escalate. His words were muffled in the rising pulse of tension. He saw what others refused to acknowledge, the subtle, quiet way Kael's hand found Leora's. The connection wasn't just political, it wasn't tactical, it was biological, and that made it dangerous. Then Saren moved. Too fast for warning, too slow for surprise. Kael met him halfway, intercepting the plasma blade with a block that sent both men sprawling. The shot went wild. Chaos erupted. Soldiers shouted, drones pulled back. Vex raised his gauntlet to issue override, but the beacon had already transmitted. It was not just a distress call, not just a locator ping. It had become a diplomatic signal routed through multiple council channels flagged as joint biological contact. The council couldn't ignore it. It had to respond. Moments later, a fourth ship arrived. Its descent was silent, almost reverent. White hull, gold-trimmed, bearing the sigil of Elder Vaith Anor, a high member of the Galactic Council, unaligned, untouchable. She stepped from her ship like a ghost, old and small, but wreathed in power that stilled every gun. The battlefield froze. Vaith raised one hand and silence returned. Kael stood panting, arm-bleeding blade at his side. Leora stood behind him, expression unreadable. Saren had disappeared into the shadows. Vex lowered his gauntlet, the enforcement routine broken by protocol. Vaith approached them, eyes scanning, seeing not just bodies, but connection. She spoke no words of condemnation. Instead, she gestured toward the diplomatic channel opened by the beacon. The council would decide, not assassins, not armies, and not the past. Kael and Leora followed her aboard. Inside the chamber was circular, ringed with seats layered in ancient runes of judgment. 12 species were present. 12 votes. 12 decisions that would shape the galaxy. Leora stood in the center, her clothing torn, her voice unshaking. Kael stood beside her, not as protector, not as soldier, but as proof. What began as exile had become evidence. What began as survival had become union. Across the chamber, the hardliners watched with cold eyes. Vex made his case. Saren filed his protest. Accusations flew. But then Kael spoke, not with fire, but with clarity. He told them of the crash, of the jungle, of the bond. He described how two people from opposite sides had become something new, an entity that shared thought, movement, blood instinct. He spoke not of war, but of possibility. Around him, silence shifted. One by one, delegates leaned forward. The air changed. Vaith watched it all, and then opened the floor to vote. It was not unanimous, but it was enough. The council ratified the Riven-Valen Accords. Outside, the ship still floated in tense stillness. But within the chamber, something irreversible had occurred. A path had been carved, not through diplomacy, not through warfare, but through a bond that neither side had predicted and no one could undo. Kael stood in the glow of the verdict, feeling the weight of consequence settle on his shoulders. Leora stepped closer, not out of habit, but out of gravity. The bond flared, once briefly affirming. They had survived, they had changed, and now so would everything else. The summit convened beneath the dome of Nexus Station, suspended above a blue-shifted planet turning slowly below. 12 species gathered in concentric circles, their emissaries radiant in ceremony, their languages translated in flickers of light and hum. This was not a council chamber carved from tradition. This was a theater of transformation, where the old rules trembled before something untested. Kael Riven and Leora Valen stood in the center, not as supplicants but as catalysts. Their presence alone unsettled the foundation. Human and Velkar, soldier and exile, bonded not by treaty but by biology, survival, and choice. Their skin bore the scars of jungle ash. Their eyes no longer sought approval. They carried the silence of those who had endured together. The proposal they introduced, structured in interlinked dataspheres and evolving protocols, was revolutionary by design and audacious by necessity. Joint colonies, cross-species command, shared defense, harmonized weapon tech filtered through dual sensory input, AI systems capable of adapting to interspecies empathy, cultural trust modeled through biological resonance patterns. Delegates stirred. Some called it impractical. Some called it sacrilege. Others recognized the future forming beneath their feet. The display arrays projected tactical overlays from the battle on Virelia 9, showing Kael and Leora moving in perfect harmony, flanking threats with fluid coordination no program could replicate. Their neural patterns, recorded mid-fight, pulsed across the screen, distinct minds coalescing in moments of decisive unity. Ambassadors spoke in succession. Some praised, some condemned. But none could deny what stood before them, the living embodiment of cooperation forged not in boardrooms, but in fire and blood. Then Dravsaran moved again. From the periphery, his form detached from shadow. His hand moved. The weapon fired. Kael stepped into the bolt before it found its mark. Leora's cry fractured the air like glass. The plasma struck Kael's shoulders, spinning him backward into her arms. Energy seared flesh, but it did not destroy. Blood flowed. The bond held. Security forces surged, apprehending Saron before he reached the second trigger, but the damage was done not in body, but in demonstration. Leora cradled Kael as he lay against her pain, fogging his vision. Around them, chaos flared, then stilled. Delegates stood in stunned silence, eyes locked on the scene. Kael raised one hand. His fingers brushed Leora's face. He didn't ask if they had won. He didn't need to. The council reconvened minutes later in emergency session, and this time there was no resistance. The vote passed, by simple majority but with overwhelming momentum. The Riven-Valen Accords were ratified, not as an experiment, but as a new foundation. Outside the chamber, Kael lay on a recovery platform, medtechs treating his wound. Leora remained at his side, her fingers interlaced with his. The bond shimmered across their skin, now visible to those who had the eyes to see it. It pulsed, not just with memory, but with potential. Their presence shifted perception. Where once the human was feared and the Velkar mistrusted, now they were something else. Not symbols, not anomalies, but proof. Later aboard the observation deck, they stood alone beneath the stars. The galaxy had turned slightly, its axis tilted toward possibility. Peace was not secured. Hostilities had not vanished. But now there was a shape to the future that could be followed. Leora leaned against Kael, her skin cool beneath his hand. They watched the planet below, silent. The bond whispered between them, not with urgency, but with promise. The child perhaps would come later, or the colony, or the ship that bore both flags. But for now, it was enough to stand together in the light of something neither war nor politics had created, a bridge only they could walk. Their future would be unpredictable, shaped by forces ancient and new. But it would be theirs, and it had already begun. This was, she taunted the human for being slow, then he vanished mid-shot. A story of survival, connection, and transformation. Kael Riven and Leora Valen didn't just escape death or betrayal, they rewrote what was possible in a galaxy at war with itself. From wreckage and ruin, they forged a bond that defied species orders and even fate. And in doing so, they became the seed of a future no one had dared to imagine. If this journey moved you, if you saw something of yourself in their courage, defiance, or love, consider subscribing to the channel, liking the story, and leaving a comment. What would you risk for peace? For someone who sees you not as a symbol, but as truth. Until next time, stay human, stay hopeful, and stay watching.